Good morning, everyone. We welcome you to our Sunday morning roundtable from the Plainfield Christian Science Church, Plainfield, New Jersey, the United States of America. And today is Sunday, November 26, 2017. And Betty will begin with our morning prayer.
Mrs. Eddy's prayer, given at the Massachusetts Metaphysical College. Oh, my God, I offer as a consecrated gift upon thine altar a heart dedicated to thy service, lips speaking only words of charity, love, and truth, thoughts striving to be the only true thoughts of the mind of God. Help me to endure to the end, strong in the faith, powerful in the truth, all the influence that I can bring to bear, all the force of tongue or pen that is mine, I offer in thy service. May heaven help, consecrate, and accept.
And miscellaneous writings. We today in this classroom are enough to convert the world if we are of one mind. For then the whole world will feel the influence of this mind, as when the earth was without form, and mind spake, and form appeared. And that was taken, it was to the primary class of the Massachusetts Metaphysical College that assembled February 25th, 1889, with an attendance of 65 students. Now, who would like to volunteer for next week?
I will. This is Nancy.
Thank you, Nancy. And you can read either that one, or if you find something else you find appropriate, it'll be fine. Okay. So we have actually two subjects today, but I'll start subject, Ancient and Modern Necromancy, alias Mesmerism and Hypnotism Denounced. Golden text, Psalm 23. I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Any comments on that? We had a wonderful Bible study yesterday on the whole 23rd Psalm that you all should listen to if you weren't here. Very inspiring as well as comforting. Parsons wrote about this on the forum, and it's a very important statement from Collectania, one you all should be familiar with. He says it's Christian Science in a nutshell. And what he says, what Mrs. Eddy says, is what pacifies fear does not destroy it. Take your weapon that kills it, the first commandment, and with that, cut off its head. What does that mean to you? I hope you aren't all sleeping after your Thanksgiving dinner.
God's already should really nullify every error, every form of it. God is all, and that's it. Nothing else.
Yes.
And don't be soft with it.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Do not be soft with it.
Said to cut off its head. Mild methods don't work. The devil is looking for people that would act mildly, because it plays games with people that do that. Either we're for God or we're not, quite frankly.
What does it mean to pacify error?
It means to, this is Michael, sorry.
Okay, Michael, go ahead.
It means to appease it, to accommodate it rather than destroy it.
Yes. Compromise with it. Talk to it. Listen to its lies and treat it softly. sometimes in the practice, you find people, especially people who are totally full of fear, they don't, what they need is a strong truth. They need to be tough with it. But what they want are nice, loving words, kind, loving words. I was that way too. Oh my gosh, if anyone spoke at all loudly to me, I would go into my corner and cry for days. And it took me a while to realize this is what I needed. This is what Mrs. Evans represented. And we also know that Christ Jesus did, and Mrs. Eddy too. They were a terror to error. So don't long to have it pacified. And another thing that Christian Scientists do is they just start quoting, because that's pacifying. That's taking their drug. It's like a baby pacifier that keeps you from crying. Now I've gotten to the point where I find it pretty much intolerable when I'm talking to someone and they start quoting to me. I know that means they're full of fear, and this is just their big cover-up. I'll talk for 5 minutes about God, and hopefully all my troubles will go away. It's not chopping its head off.
I love the story where Mrs. Eddy was in her room. Someone from the household was delivering a tray of food to her, and they weren't feeling well, and they weren't honest about it. And when Mrs. Eddy opened the door, she said, "Drop it!" And everything fell and broke and spilled. And when the person came back to clean up, they were perfectly well.
Excellent.
I think it's miscellaneous writings, but I think Mrs. Eddy writes about accommodating error and then having it be multiply and then become even worse than the original problem. So the long-term effect is that it will overwhelm you if you don't wipe it out.
That's exactly right. And you might as well take a drug or something, because that's what you are. You're drugging yourself when you're trying to pacify it. It can't be pacified. You've got to have all your guns blasting and blaring. Now, what is the first commandment?
And thou shalt have no other gods before me.
Yes. So, the basic truth of this all is when you are fearing evil, you are creating a God before the one God. And you are worshiping it. So you ask yourself, what are you afraid of? What God have you made? What false image are you worshiping? And then, stop it! You don't have to. You don't have to worship a false God. It's got you in your clutches because you've been deceived by its apparent power. But when confronted, you will find it has none. Mrs. Eddy says, error is a coward before truth. You just haven't confronted it. So, you think about today what you are afraid of, and you confront it, and you chop its head off with the first commandment. There's nothing to fear when you operate like this, and this is handling the error, not avoiding it or ignoring it or pacifying it, but it is destroying it. And this goes perfectly. Who will read the first two citations in Science and Health for us? Jeffrey.
God is infinite, therefore ever present, and there is no other power nor presence. We bury the sense of infinitude when we admit that, although God is infinite,
Evil has a place in this infinity, for evil can have no place where all space is filled with God. We lose the high signification of omnipotence when, after admitting that God, or good, is omnipresent and has all power, we still believe there is another power named evil.
Thank you. Now, isn't that perfect logic?
Absolutely. Makes perfect sense.
Perfect sense. So ask yourself, am I doing this? Oh, yeah, God is all power. God is everything. Oh, my gosh. Did you see the news today? You have to stick to your guns. This is what keeps you from getting mesmerized by the picture. And right, she's saying here, right where you think there's some evil going on, whether it's in your body, your home, in your business, in your country, wherever you think it's going on, she's saying there's no other power or presence. So it can't be. It's an illusion. And maybe a lot of people are believing it, and that makes it seem all the more real. So you have to demesmerize yourself, and in doing that, you'll find the whole picture will become demesmerized. This is why we watch. This is the handling of animal magnetism, which is what this subject is about today.
And this is the basis of Christian healing. To demesmerize ourselves.
And I thought it was interesting what Michael wrote on the forum. You know, the fact we have an ancient and modern necromancy, alias mesmerism, hypnotism denounced lesson, and a Thanksgiving lesson. Do you want to say anything, Michael, on that?
Yeah, I don't know who. It might have been Mrs. Eddy who deliberately put these two lessons together, but I can't speak for anyone else, but I have felt in the past that whatever issues I have are become sort of worse during this week, or try to anyways. And I think that it might have been that specifically she knew that Thanksgiving and the gratitude lesson would counteract that, and possibly because when you confront error directly, I think she says in Science and Health, where she says error will scream even louder. And that's what I've experienced in the past. So it's actually what I went through this week too. And that's when I was told that, it made sense to me. And I don't know if anyone else can speak on that also, but it seems to be more resistant error, during this week than in other times.
And why is that?
Yes. It's. I think
you don't have to answer it unless you want to.
Anybody else answer that?
Why is it more aggressive, Lil?
The human mind wants to be heard, and it's not going to be stopped. It will be stopped, but it just wants to be heard, and it just goes on and on and on.
And why does it choose this week?
Because everybody's believing in the material and not the spiritual. They're not taking the first commandment to have no other gods. They're having all these other gods, and they're making them so important to themselves.
And why? What's going on this week?
People are busy trying to go to the stores to buy presents, to get bargains, and they kind of neglect God a little bit, and they just push it to the back and concentrate on the material stuff instead of God.
Thank you both. Absolutely.
It is the Antichrist trying to take Christmas away from the world.
Yes.
And Thanksgiving too.
Thanksgiving We even have people who write now anti-Thanksgiving stuff, and it's really because they're against the gratitude and the principle and spirit of it. And they try to make it look bad. There's these articles that come out about how we were so horrible to the American Indians and try to debunk everything. but they have discovered that the people behind it are their purpose is to undermine the Christ spirit of it.
This is why it's important to know our history. And this is why I've recommended to some of you this. It's on Netflix now. It was on BBC Channel 13, something called The Pilgrims. We've watched it a couple times here. It's very slow and meandering, but it gives you really what went on. And the Pilgrims, do you remember, Bruce? Go ahead. They didn't fight with the Indians.
No, they didn't. They cooperated with them.
They did.
They worked together, and that's what this Thanksgiving feast is all about. The Wampanoag tribe joined the Pilgrims, celebrated together in this feast.
The only fighting they did was against the aggressive tribe, and they were fought with the Wampanoag, is that how you say, to protect. It was because to defense. It wasn't aggressive.
And a short time later, after the Pilgrims came, and the people in England heard what bounty and all the things that could be found here, then came the mercenaries. And they came just to take the land and to kill all the beavers and everything. And yes, they caused trouble because of their thought. But originally, the Pilgrims they weren't that type of people. Eventually, maybe they had to defend themselves, but it was this greed that came in that started it. It always is. It's the human mind, and that's what we're at war with. But that does not wipe out the tremendous sacrifice and all the good and the tremendous prayer that went on from these people who came over.
You also got to consider the motivation for the Pilgrims. They wanted to worship God as a matter of conscience. And where they were from, over in England, there was a lot of oppression because it was the government and the king that ruled their religion and had to be of a certain type and according to their format, and if it wasn't, they were persecuted, and they were. What happened to worshiping God as a matter of conscience without being ruled over by somebody who's in a high position? Now that really is a right idea. That's a pure motive. And Christian Science teaches exactly that. Man and God are one. So let's worship God as a matter of conscience and please God and not be in a position where we have to please other people or try to be obligated to other people's expectations of us. My expectation is of the Lord, the Bible says. That's where the Pilgrims were.
That's where the Pilgrims were. And later, when the greedy ones came, they didn't come for that purpose. They came for material gain.
Yeah, they came to commercialize everything.
They did.
Right.
They did. And that did bring trouble, as it always will. As it always will.
And it's lawlessness.
It is.
Yeah, totally against the law of right, the law of God.
Absolutely. So.
And there's the family element, too. That he might be referring to, the family element of getting together on Thanksgiving and all the blood relatives.
Oh, right, yes. We've called it for years, the bloody holidays. And it brings out sometimes the worst at this time. People arguing and fighting, getting sick, other things. It's just the materialism, as Gary said, the Antichrist. And it needs to be handled. And we start handling it before Thanksgiving. And we certainly handle it. It used to be we'd start the day after Thanksgiving. Now we have to start before because they've commercialized Thanksgiving so much. Start reading and working with what Christmas means to be by Mrs. Eddy, and you keep yourself in the secret place of the Most High. I know Florence can say this too. We get a lot of calls during this time. There's a great uptick in calls because of all of this going on. People feel it. And as you grow in science, you will feel it too. It will become more despicable to you, the materialism. But that doesn't mean that you have to hate or dread it the time. It means you just have to work more and keep yourself in the secret place of the Most High. Jeffrey?
You called it thanks living, right?
Yes, that was, who gave that testimony? Shardy. It was in a calendar.
Yes, that's excellent. In everything give thanks, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus concerning you. We're doing this all the time here.
We are.
So we're practiced at it, I guess.
And thank you, because that was where I was going to go next, to that golden text of thanksgiving, which is from Thessalonians. Because I was thinking about it. Sometimes people will say, well, I don't know what the will of God is. What is the will of God? I don't know what that is. What am I supposed to do? Well, hello. This is a good starting place. But what does he say what does it say the will of God is concerning you?
Give thanks.
Yes. In everything give thanks. So if you don't know what the will of God is, start there, because very often people who think they don't know the will of God can be old prunes and can be curmudgeonly and can be, I don't know, and God hasn't told me what to do, and I'm just, and so they block out God's messages. Start there, and before it, Thessalonians says, rejoice evermore, pray without ceasing, in everything give thanks, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus concerning you. So you don't know where to move. You don't know what your job should be. You don't know who you should marry, or you don't know what to do with your child, or you don't know because you're so sick what you should do. Start with these three things. I bet a lot will open up. Try rejoicing, praying, and giving thanks. And do it before the manifestation comes. You do it now. This is God's will concerning you. So if you're not doing it, what does that mean?
Disobedient.
Yes, you are. You are disobedient. You are disobeying your Father. And now that you know better, if you don't do it, it's rebellious.
When you said that, the whole idea of rejoicing also kicked out. Because I know I've been in that situation. I don't know what to do, and I can feel the fear and the confusion and the indecision. Well, instead of doing that, we could cast them all out and replace them with a little rejoicing and praying and giving thanks. And then things will open up.
They will.
Our God is with us.
It must be done sincerely as best you can. You might start out with maybe not feeling it, but you get where you start to feel it. You can't fake it. You can't say, oh, thank you, God, and grumble, grumble, grumble. You've got to make sure your head and your heart are going together here. And you will be surprised what will open up. Job opportunities, maybe you'll meet somebody, or a house, you'll move to some house that seems perfect. All these things will open up, and God's will become very plain in other ways. But start here. It's specific. And yet, many people just, I don't want to do that. I want to know what my next job's going to be. I don't care about rejoicing and being grateful.
Oh, you're so focused on the problem, you think you can't rejoice, or there's nothing to be thankful for.
That's right. And what did you say on the forum?
Are you grateful for life, truth, and love, like Mrs. Eddy said? I mean, we have that. That is something to possess and be grateful for.
Absolutely.
Sorry.
And what did Jesus do before he told Lazarus to come out of the cave?
Gave thanks.
Exactly.
So, and I said it, I think it was my testimony, on Thursday, but I'll say it again. This is from Collectania 73, Mrs. Eddy. Ingratitude is the original sum total of evil. Get that in your noggin, okay? Sum total of evil when you're ungrateful. And its only remedy is gratitude, which she is calling the highest human quality. and it will be its destruction, the destruction of ingratitude. I realized in my life that a lot of my problems were because I was not grateful. My physical problems, my emotional problems, my relationship problems. You think it's some little thing. It is not some little thing.
You can't think of two things at the same time. You can't think about something bad and good. Make your choice. There's only one choice.
That's right. You can't be grateful and miserable at the same time. You try it. It's impossible. It won't work.
But you hear often, oh, but I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful. But then at the same time, so miserable, so miserable.
I know. Well, that means you're not grateful.
Well, I realized before that I had good things, but then I was not grateful, and because I wasn't grateful, I didn't set boundaries, and I placated the evil and all that, and I didn't uphold that standard, so things just fell away. And so I don't know. It's interesting to see that now, how that gratitude is so important to keep everything going the right way.
It's the antidote for so many things, for depression. As Lillian just said, Lillian is turning into a blabbermouth, and I'm so grateful. Anyway, it's the antidote for, I say that very lovingly, for us. With great love. It's the antidote for depression, because as she just said, you cannot be grateful and depressed. You cannot be fearful and depressed. You cannot be stressed out, you cannot be fearful and grateful at the same time. You cannot be stressed out and grateful at the same time. You cannot feel separated from God and feel grateful for Him at the same time. It's impossible. And if you say you are grateful, which is what I used to do, I'm grateful. I thank everybody. I write thank you notes. Mother trained me, but I wasn't grateful. Not really grateful.
Gratitude breaks the mesmerism.
It absolutely does. So, okay, we will spend our days rejoicing evermore, praying without ceasing, and in giving thanks in everything. Now, okay, Jeremy, you can tell us some of the lessons you learned from the story of Asa.
Oh, okay. I actually realized I titled it incorrectly. I believe it's supposed to be Asa and the self-destructive thought.
Oh, okay.
Well,
that's belief.
Yeah, just that idea that, when we hold on to this idea that in some way it was us that did things, and it, wasn't really God that came through, that it's going to keep us in that human mind, and we're not going to gain that higher thought. And as soon as that good thing's over, we're just going to revert right back to wherever we were, or worse. So I just think that's very, very fascinating, because I know that happened to me in the past too. So to see beyond this and know that when we understand Christian Science and we know how to correctly live, it can't be reverted to anything else. And I got thinking about, like, divine mind cannot become the human mind, and because they are not on the same path. It's not like you can turn around and move away from the divine mind and go back to the human mind. There's nothing to go to. So, I don't know, all these things, that's why there's no reversal. So I just found all of that really, really wonderful to really understand and know. So I cannot identify myself again as self-destructive, because I now understand that only error self-destroys.
Yes. Thank you. That's wonderful. Understanding can't retrograde. Mrs. Eddy says you can't go backwards. If you don't understand it, then you're flipping and flopping. So you have to get, and how do you get where you're understanding it?
Proving it?
Yes.
Demonstrating?
Yes, you have to prove it. You can't just sit and read. You have to make your own demonstration. You can't rely on just your practitioner or what you're hearing here. You've got to do it yourself.
Make those quotes your own.
Yes. You use those quotes and make them your own. And Elizabeth, what did you say about this story?
Let's see, what did I say? Talking about how he was listening at first to, he was seeking God. Asa was seeking God. And he said, therefore, he said unto Judah, let us build these cities and make about them walls and towers, gates and bars, while the land is yet before us. Because we have sought the Lord our God, we have sought him, and he hath given us rest on every side. And so I guess what I was thinking is they were not just enjoying the peace, they were using their time to not be idle. And because he continued to put God first and didn't neglect to be thankful, he was delivered from the Ethiopian. And that kind of also worked in with that watch on Tuesday, which I really liked, which was, beware that thou forget not the Lord thy God, lest when thou hast eaten and art full, and hast built goodly houses, then thine heart be lifted up, and that thou forget the Lord thy God, which brought thee forth out of the land of Egypt from the house of bondage.
Thank you. Because when things are going well, it's very easy to get sloppy. You think you don't need to read your lesson or spend so much time in prayer. And that's where the most discipline is, when things are going well. You have all these distractions, you've got your health, maybe you have great relationship, you have a nice home, you have everything going for you, so why not start traveling and doing all this stuff and losing your connection eventually.
And losing your purpose.
Yeah. While you're telling yourself you're not, but it's a drifting, it's a falling away.
What use are you to God when you're in that state? None.
What?
What use are we to God in that state? None.
That's right. That's why in science, once you start going, you have to pick up this giving back. You're not here just to take. That's such a horrible thought. I mean, you go to church. I mean, Tom has commented on this. You come to church just to take. No, you learn here. You come because you're to be giving. And then when you do that, you cannot just stay home or play tennis or whatever on a Sunday morning or eat donuts and read the newspaper. You're motivated to give. And I will say, and I was very happy to hear Elizabeth say it in her testimony on Thursday about our liberator. Freely you have received, freely give. It is a beautiful one. You should all read it from cover to cover. It's God's word speaking to us on that subject. And again, through science or suffering. So, first time around, Asa learned through science. He was living his truth. Second time around, he learned, maybe if he did learn, through suffering. Which brings us to, I thought what Tom wrote about long suffering was really good. Tom, you better be there.
I'm here.
Okay.
Yeah, I just got on mute, but keep on to read it.
Yeah, you can read it. I think so. It's all good.
Okay. Long suffering. I mean, it's not a word that I generally use. When I looked at the word, and I've seen it before, we've read this before, I was thinking like, okay, so you suffer long. So I thought, let me look into this and write something up on it, So that's why I said, why would we want to suffer? But frankly, if you look at the definition, that's not what it's about, So I did look it up in Bible Hub. I think that's very useful. And what the Greek definition is, and it says here, waiting sufficient time before expressing anger. This avoids the premature use of force, in parentheses, retribution, that rises out of improper anger, in brackets, a personal reaction. So, when you look at the other Bible translations, some use the word patience, which I think that's what that means, and other translations uses the word forbearance, which also seems to be a little more explanatory. But I was looking at this Greek definition at the end. It says a personal reaction. I go, oh, okay. Because if we're really mad at something and then we just give some time and then we get mad at them, I'm not sure what's different other than we waited before we got mad, So I was looking around and I read this in The Healing of the Nations by William McCracken. It says, divine love separates personal sense from person and so saves men. So I thought that was saying a couple really helpful things. One, why do we have this forbearance or patience, or why do we wait sufficient time before expressing anger? That's because when we look at whatever it is that got us angry, we're separating out the personal sense from the person. So we're not going to get mad at the person. And the second part of this is, which I really, really liked, was, well, this saves men, so this is good for us. So it also says in the articles, this so saves men and nations, but this sense of separating personal sense from person is like a healing quality for us.
Thank you. When you think of it, when someone acts just out of anger, reacts, personal sense, they're offended. It can start fights. It can start wars. It's personal sense. There's that old saying: you count to 10 before you say anything. But you do have to be somewhat careful if there is righteous indignation. If the offense is to God, and God moves you to speak out, it's good to do it immediately. Because I know in my own experience, sometimes if I wait too long, I just won't ever say anything, and that's not right either. There has to be a right balance. But and this is talking about reacting in anger. You're offended, you're mad, and get back right away. Say things you'll regret later. So that was very good thoughts on long suffering, because as he started out, no one wants to be suffering for a long period of time. So it's addressing personal sense. And that leads us to a very important section in Science and Health, where I will have, we'll read numbers 9, numbers 10.
Number 9. The good you do and embody gives you the only power obtainable.
Stop right there. Remember that. The good you do and embody gives you the only power obtainable. And that works the other way around, too. We were taught here the only power anyone has is to what? To bless us.
Bless you.
Yes. Don't think that nasty neighbor over there has some terrible power over you. The only power God gives anyone is to bless. And if you know it and demand it, that's all you will have. And that is the only power you have, too. You did not screw up somebody's life. They'll be screwed up forever. which is what we think. The only power we have is to bless, and if we know it, we will see this manifested. Okay, go ahead, please.
Number 10. Many are willing to open the eyes of the people to the power of good, resident divine mind, but they are not so willing to point out the evil in human thought and expose evil's hidden mental ways of accomplishing iniquity. Why this backwardness? Since exposure is necessary to ensure the avoidance of evil. Because people like you better when you tell them their virtues than when you tell them their vices. It requires the spirit of our blessed Master to tell a man his faults, and so risk human displeasure for the sake of doing right and benefiting our race. Who is telling mankind of the foe in ambush? Is the informer one who sees the foe? If so, listen and be wise. Escape from evil, and designate those as unfaithful stewards who have seen the danger and yet have given no warning. At all times and under all circumstances, overcome evil with good. Know thyself, and God will supply the wisdom and the occasion for a victory over evil. Clad in the panoply of love, human hatred cannot reach you. The cement of a higher humanity will unite all interests in the one divinity.
Thank you. Any comments on that?
I have, this is Michael. I've noticed this tendency, this refusal or resistance in many Christian scientists I've known to deal with this exact issue and to confront or discuss some erroneous situation. And sometimes even when the problem has even been damaging to the very church itself, it has still been ignored. And I've even experienced, I've been scolded for talking about things like this when situations have come up. So it's really an important passage. And just glad, again, with this church that you are addressing it and talking about it because it's so important.
Thank you, Michael. That is so right. You know, I mean, we used to have this passage in a lot of our lessons. Evans loved it. And the reason she loved it is because just what Michael said. She just saw this airy-fairy, God is love, we don't, you know, I had recently someone who called, someone I didn't know, he called to thank Gary, or to say how much he enjoyed Gary's reading. Good. Then he said, unlike you, I'm not hostile to he calls it the Mother Church. I call it the BOD, or the Cement Center. And I don't say that with hostility. I say it with great love. So I thought a moment, and I said, well, the reason that Gary reads, because what he said is Gary reads with great depth and understanding. He said the reason he does that is because he understands the history of our church, and he understands exactly what has gone on, and we are certainly not hostile, but we must do as this says right here. Tell about the foe in ambush. But it's interesting because anytime I will mention anything like that, there are always a few who say, oh no, you said something unkind. and so then we are to just shut our mouths and not say anything? I don't think so. This has to be exposed. This is what Mrs. Eddy is talking about. And it's not just this, it's any type of error. And we don't see it as real or as person, but we see it as animal magnetism that needs to be destroyed.
And this tendency is not unique to Christian scientists. It is the human mind. And it affects anybody who is not filled with the love of God and willing to point out the foe in ambush. It's just that if you're going to profess to be a Christian Scientist, you better overcome this tendency pretty quickly. Otherwise, you're not going to be of any use. Because science is not personal.
I think it's helpful for me to remember in the daily duties neither animosity nor mere personal attachment should impel the motives or acts of the members of the Mother Church. That when I think about that and I think about why I'm saying something or not saying something or doing something or not doing something, it's a very important checking point for me.
Thank you.
Very important.
Yeah.
And it
Also,
puts the sweet amenities of love in rebuking sin. It's the first one. Go ahead, Mike.
Also, where is the hostility directed? What I had posted was that I am so shocked that I could not love the 23rd Psalm as it was not taught in Sunday school. So that's hostility to God, because right after it talks about the valley of death, it says, I am there with you and fear no evil. I mean, they never taught me that part. And so the hostility, if there is any, is against the error and what's the false sense of God that is being taught all over the place. And that needs to be crushed. And the love is for humanity when you point that out, because then it just frees you from all that erroneous belief. So thank you for your hostility to error.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Mike.
No, that's exactly true. And we must be. That's being the terror to error. And believe me, I did not used to be this way. I was totally the other way. I would never say anything about anybody. So I thought that was unloving. But in the meantime, I was churning inside and had all kinds of lousy thoughts going on, which I wasn't addressing. This is very healthy to get it out, to speak out. And we are ever grateful to be that they excommunicated us. I mean, if there was any hostility. Anyway, we're the ones who got excommunicated. So, but we were grateful for that, because it's freed us to do what we've needed to do and to have all this wonderful literature, and so grateful. It was all God's plan. But don't let these paragraphs slip out of your arsenal because you were too cowardly to confront an error, because that's what it is. That's what it was in my case. That's what it is in every case. This big sense, personal sense, as we talked about. You want people to like you. You're afraid what they're going to say. If you really love, you will speak up.
And nothing can happen to you that hasn't happened to others. I mean, what's the worst that can happen? Jesus spoke up.
Well, and he was crucified.
And they crucified.
Maybe that's the worst. But he was resurrected. That's your point, I'm sure.
Well,
Just be afraid someone might not like you.
exactly. Today it's illegal to kill someone for what they say, for pointing out the foe in the ambush.
We can thank God for that we have this freedom now in this country at this present time.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot get your head cut off for speaking up. But, you do have to handle the kickback or any malpractice, which we will talk about in a moment. But it's something, and as this said, if God is with you, you are clad in the panoply of love. It does not mean, however, that you just go around and point out other people's faults and just carry on in a negative, critical, unkind way, which has also been interpreted. That is equally as bad as not saying anything.
And that's also explained in the passage here, for the sake of doing right and benefiting our race. That's the reason for speaking up
Yes.
and pointing out things that are wrong.
Yes, it goes back to what Day said, the rule for motives and acts. It's out of love that this is done. And it has to be done. So much has gone on because people have not spoken up. So let's not remember that. Any comment on this before I...
That's kind of the attitude that I take on when I have to talk to family members or something like that, or my sister, and specifically that comes to the shop. She started coming with wine, a glass of wine, and things like that. And but just kind of thought, well, what's it going to hurt if I speak up to her? They haven't talked to me in 20 years. Was she not going to talk to me anymore? I lived through those 20 years. So it's only going to be beneficial. It's only going to bless her. There isn't going to be anything worse than what's already happening.
Well, that's true. Yes. And since you have been speaking up, things have been infinitely better. Is that not true?
That's true. Now she comes and she might still drink wine, but she leaves the wine in the car. She doesn't bring it in the shop. So it's this little step by step as the truth is getting in there, and she sees the blessing of coming to the shop and spending a few hours in the shop with me. And she hasn't been talking about the past as much. And at first she would talk about the past, and I would maybe make comments about the past or something like that, but I'm getting to the point now where it's like it's so difficult for me to even listen to it that I just have to say, if you're going to talk like that or you're going to think like that, then you're going to have to leave.
And that's exactly all you have to do, and that's confronting the error, and it's blessing her, and you're doing it out of love, because the other just leads to nothing good. That's all it is. It's loving enough to speak up and speak out. And so that's a great example. Thank you, Luann.
And a love for God.
And yes, mainly a love for God, always. If the offense be to God. And I always study that, the two articles I've told you about in miscellaneous writing, taking offense and loving your enemies. Okay, I'm going to conclude now. This is from Mary Baker Eddy's Lessons of the Seventh Day. This is entitled Handling Animal Magnetism. Animal magnetism is the belief in material man that life, substance, and intelligence are material instead of spiritual. 1. There is ignorant animal magnetism, which includes all beliefs of cold, damp, climate, food, heredity, contagion, producing disease. 2. There is malicious animal magnetism, including belief of anger, envy, jealousy, hate, etc., held against another person. 3. There is malicious mental malpractice, which is educated thought that has learned the power of thought and uses it for a wrong end. Malicious mental malpractice is not power, mind, or law. It has no sphere of activity, no mind to project its beliefs, no mind to accept its beliefs. It has no dupes, no victims. It is not law. It is not a lawmaker. Keep the joy of Christian Science and a well-grounded and boundless hope in your success. Remember, as truth progresses, error grows more subtle and aggressive, but it does not become something. It always remains an illusion and is always met and destroyed with the understanding that divine love is the only power. Malicious animal magnetism stands ready to argue misunderstanding, and the only safe way in hours of trial is to obey the adage, silence is golden. If anyone has wronged you, you cannot hide it from wisdom. We must all look to principle and let light dispel the darkness and settle down to peace and prosperity. There is no mortal mind that can influence or darken our consciousness, Love is almighty. Keep declaring for principle, life, truth, and love. They are omnipotent. It is love that uncovers and overcomes. And I will say, just briefly in this, I did find out Martha Wilcox was attacked by the BOD. They were going to try to excommunicate her, and she retreated for several days in prayer, and they backed off. So, before you ever do anything, you retreat in prayer, and God will direct your path, whether you are to speak up or not. And with that, we will end this session. Thank you all for your wonderful contributions, and we will go forward to have a wonderful service.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.